So, you may or may not know that last year in 2024 in December, I released the most comprehensive history of Loewe ever written. There is no book, no documentary, no biography in existence that is more detailed than my video. However, there are two things within that video that struck out to me as totally lost media. The first is this Spring-Summer 73 collaboration collection between Loewe and Chloe, designed by Karl Lagerfeld, which is somewhat recorded in the $1,000 book Loewe Past, Present and Future, with this image of the Loewe and Chloe tags and this image of an envelope. Other than that, there are no other images of this collection that remain today in the public consciousness at the very least. I have asked Loewe, they don't have any pictures either. The other was the 1996 150-year anniversary massive celebration, which is not recorded anywhere whatsoever. I cannot tell you how many months of work went into the making of that 2.5-hour long biography. Yes, I can. It was about 4 months. More on if you add to the fact that I also made this video about Jonathan's departure as well. And yet, in all of those many months of dedicated research for which Loewe themselves was helping, I was not doing this alone, I only found out about this celebration at the very last minute. I had no idea what the celebration entailed, I didn't know what it was really, and there was no information absolutely anywhere in any of the research that I did that would have told me what was going on. The only reason, in fact, that I found out about this 150-year celebration was due to a totally random discovery of this book being sold on a resale website. Obviously, I bought the book. It never actually arrived, but I did buy the book and I continued researching, continued digging. Soon, I discovered that not only was there a book, but there was loads of stuff. There happened to have been a 150th anniversary annual dinner. There was a very specific packaging. Here's one I found with the wallet. There was a ceramic pendant that was done. I didn't buy any of these three, but I found something far more interesting that I absolutely had to get my hands on. And that was this set, which included a medallion or a coin. There was dedicated packaging, dedicated shopping bag, and best of all, there was a VHS tape that was also part of the celebration. But I had no idea what was on it. All of this I managed to find on a website called Todo Collection, which is a Spanish resale site, which I had never heard of before this. But I spent the €200 to buy the coin, the bag, the backup book, which thank goodness I did include it because the first one did get cancelled, and the VHS tape. I was hooked. I needed to see what was on this VHS tape, absolutely desperately. As much as I was interested in the book, the mystery of this tape had me completely hooked because it was in a collection that specifically dated them 1846 to 1996, which is something that particularly interested to me because I had never heard of any kind of documentation about the history of Loewe before this book/video at all. I thought that just a biography had never been written. So back to Todo Collection. I put in my order. I had to bank transfer the vendor to send the money over, which I'm sure is very normal in Spain, but it felt very unsafe to me. And sure enough, the parcel was sent quickly and a tracking number was provided. Estimated time of delivery, January 2025. This was about a month after my entire History of Loewe video was even planned, let alone started recording. I did consider delaying the video, actually. I took a note of it on Instagram, and most people said that I should delay the video, in fact, but because of Jonathan Anderson's departure rumors, I was advised by somebody who I have to remain nameless that I should just have the video out into the world so that it exists. And I did, and I put it out into the world, and I'm very glad that I did. Of course, his departure was not announced in the December, as I was advised, so we can thank Matthew Blasi for announcing his place at Chanel for that. But regardless, I was and am very incredibly proud of that video, even if it has these two main areas of further research. And so I waited. Happy with the video that was out, but I waited for this VHS tape for this book to arrive. I bought a VHS player secondhand, all the many wires that needed to connect it to my computer. I bought a tester VHS tape because I didn't want the Loewe tape to be my test dummy for this secondhand VHS player. By the 30th of December, I got the notification that the parcel was delivered way earlier than it was planned to be delivered, and I went to unwrap it. The VHS tape, the bag, the coin, the book. I'm so sorry. I'm recording this video, like the audio for this video, in April. I 100% forgot that I was unwrapping this in my pajamas. Just excuse those. Apparently I was too excited to not record. Anyway, sorry, continuing on. Now, the book I was blown away with. There were, on top of all the information, which I'll go into in a second, 5 to 10 images that I had never seen before, but there was actually a lot of information in this book that I had never seen written anywhere else. In fact, there were 26 things across the history of the brand that I either didn't know or needed to be confirmed before my original video came out. It was incredible. I'm going to list them now. There are 26 of them, so just be warned that this is going to be a little bit long. Interesting, but long. Okay, ready? Number 1, the royal warrants were invented to show people abroad which companies using traditional and famed techniques were the good ones, which means it's very likely that Loewe was the first person, or Loewe was the first company to receive a royal warrant in leather goods in Spain. 2, in the very, very early years, on top of all the other things they also sold fishing tackle. 3, Loewe's sons' names were Georges Linique, born 1879. His daughter Julia I did also talk about in the big video, but she was born in 1875 and we knew that anyway. 4, the workshop on Canizares Street, which hired over 100 employees, was recorded as the first place of Loewe clothing being sold as well as hats. Number 5, Enrique Loewe Hinton becomes his father's attorney and takes the reins of their large ongoing expansions after 1905, but it seems to suggest it's either in or after 1910, just in context. It also says his wife's name is Pilar Alonso. Number 6, there was already a third store by 1910, which I think might be in the video already. I'm not quite sure on that one. Number 7, in 1910, they began to add electrified motors into their workshops, thanks to Enrique Loewe Hinton's second wife, Ida Knapp Muller's family, owning an electrical goods store. Number 8, it's assumed that Loewe Hinton linked the family back to the Loewe's in Germany, who had apparently also continued their leather trade in Germany, and they had even tried a commercial partnership thanks to their electrification. Number 9, Loewe Hinton and Ida's 4 children were called Enrique, Charlotte, Germain, and Louis, but Louis died prematurely. Number 10, in 1914, they closed the Cal Principe store in order to expand into trendier areas, or at least that's what the book says. They also had a workforce that had halved since the 100 minimum on the Canizares Street, so take from that what you will. Number 11, 7 Central Fonatella Street, which was also named from 1932 onwards as number 13 Central Fonatella Street, was the address of the first store that Loewe actively owned themselves, i.e. not rented, and it was their first store in Barcelona, so that's the address of that, which was shortly followed by a second store in the same year on 30 Fernando Street next to the St. Jamie Church. Number 12, in 1928, Loewe modernized the workshops again by installing even newer electric motors and moving the carpentry workshop onto the 3rd floor, so they could now have 25 carpentry workers. Number 13, for a time around Loewe Hinton's death, there was a store on 18 del Tramo Intermedio. Number 14, the store that Loewe rented on Gran Via in 1936, then it was known as Avenida del Conde, became formally owned by them in 1939 following the Civil War. Number 15, the Barcelona store was closed in 1940 and a new location was soon chosen in Madrid at 35 Pasco de Gracia, which was wildly successful. Number 16, Enrique Loewe Knapp married Olivia Lynch Craven and had 2 children named Enrique, born in 1941, and Margarita, born 1943. Number 17, the post-World War II period was very, very difficult for the brand as they were expected to start up again unchangingly. However, for obvious reasons, that was incredibly hard, most notably difficult because it meant they didn't have access to fine materials anymore. This is something we also discussed in my Karl Lagerfeld video. Most brands had this problem, but it did force Loewe to open a facility in Tagier to be nearest the production of fine leather. Number 18, when the brothers split Loewe into Madrid versus Barcelona, the book says it was on good terms. However, this one actually led me down a whole separate rabbit hole in which I found an interview with Enrique Loewe Knapp in which he says, quote, "My uncle Germain was rescued by my father on behalf of the family business from being drafted into the German army for the Polish campaign in 1940. From then on, he protected him and let him create his private preserve there, his own little personal and social paradise." He was referring to the fact that he had managed to avoid the mandatory military service in 1933, I think Hitler introduced it, but was being drafted in the 1940 mandatory military service of global German people abroad. And so the business was effectively split so that they could avoid the mandatory military service. This blows my mind. I can't believe I didn't find this before. That's the reason they split the company into two. And that's why they were still on good terms, because they wanted to use it as the fact that they were business owners to avoid having to fight with the Nazis. They effectively used Loewe as an excuse to say that they were promoting German ideals abroad and they should be able to be kept in business. I just think that's fascinating. Fascinating stuff. I'm sure there's more to research there. Anyway, back to the list. Number 19, Perez de Rosa's first job was in the Paseo de Gracia store. He was already a well-known couturier, but here he would make both couture and handbags, taking over the full basement of the store. The handbags were actually an immediate success because they were created like jewelry, because he was also a jeweler. And it was after that he did the windows because they were so successful as the bags. And he was already there as their in-house couturier. Number 20, in 1950, they overhauled their logistics by creating a central hub on construction with a huge factory on La Calle Batalha del Salado. I'm not very good at Spanish, I'm sorry. Madrid, that would then send out standardized products to each store, which replaced the each store produces individually in-house model that they had previously, which ultimately led to the creation of Loewe as a business, Loewe SA, in 1951. That's what brought it into the new generation. Number 21, they didn't only license ready-to-wear from Dior, as I had mentioned that was how they introduced clothing into the store, but they also introduced Chloé, Avagold, Falconetto, and Ken Scott, who would later go on to design for Loewe later. They also stocked glassware in the store from Maurano and Finlandia, suitcases from Samsonite, and shoes from Laure. 22. In the 1960s, the window dressing was taken over by Juan Manuel Betancourt. He was likely introduced by Vincent Velard, who would go on to recommend Carmen Perujo, Ricardo Meza, Amadeo Gabino, and Aurelia Munoz. 23. In 1965, they say the London store in the Hilton was moved to Jermyn Street, but they don't mention that the first London store was bombed, and I assume that was the reason they had to move. This one also sent me down another rabbit hole with Enrique Loewe Lynch, who revealed that it was actually his father, against the company's wishes, that flew into London and wanted to open a London store. That is why he was trying to separate the two names of Loewe in Spain and Loewe in England. He was trying to claim that Loewe was his own business, not this business that was in Spain. And they didn't want the shop in the London Hilton store. He had opened it without their permission, trying to take the business for himself. Enrique Loewe Lynch, in the same interview that I mentioned found me in this rabbit hole before, he said, quote, "My father flew in the early 60s. He left for London for personal and private reasons, causing an uproar in the family and the business of unimaginable magnitude. He disappeared. He abandoned us. It was a kind of cataclysm and the beginning of a turbulent relationship between him and the family members, also with his employees and managers. Although that didn't stop him, who tried to keep those of us who remained at a distance from opening a small Loewe store in the shopping arcade of the London Hilton, which was soon blown up by an IRA bomb. Then tirelessly he opened another, the definitive one, on Bond Street in 1969. So all of this London stuff was done really extremely against anything Loewe actually wanted. It was their first international store and they didn't want it. Fascinating stuff. Moving on, number 24, the fact that Karl Lagerfeld was the first to use the logo as a logo on clothes, etc., is confirmed by this book. So Loewe themselves gave that information out. It's not just from the journalist that I had learnt that information from before, who had interviewed Karl Lagerfeld. We now have it confirmed. Number 25, Armani did not just window dress for Loewe, he also designed clothes for Loewe as well. I'm sure there are pictures of these somewhere in their archive. I really want to see them. And number 26, there was a dedicated Loewe men's store opened in 1986 to coincide with their first Loewe men's show, but they don't say where. I'm assuming it's New York just because that's in the same year that they debuted the fashion show, which was in New York. So those are the 26 things that I learned from the book. Fascinating, fascinating book. I don't know how to make this public. I don't know if it's legal for me to make it public actually, but I have it. Those are the new things outside of my video that we learned. I'll put it that way. Moving on to the other things that came in this little package. The coin was really cool, quite dirty, but it's okay. I'm not sure how to clean it. I will if I can figure out how to do that. It came in a little box. I thought that was very cute. I also found a certificate of authenticity in the book, which was not listed on the original Toto Collections thing. I thought that was really cool. But in the end, the pièce de résistance was the VHS. I was so excited to watch it. I was thrilled. I set up my secondhand VHS recorder. I had a little bit of a kerfuffle with it when it didn't work. I ended up having to do it in front of the TV on my laptop. Anyway, I put the VHS tape in and nothing. The tape was ruined. I had to Google it. It took me a really long time, but apparently videotapes supposedly only last 10 to 15 years, and this tape is pushing 30 years, so I assumed it was unrecoverable. Fortunately, I am in contact with people at Loewe, so I did contact Daniel Motomello at Loewe in case they had a recording that they could connect me with. There is a screenshot in their 27 book of what it should look like, so I thought maybe they would have, but there was nothing. They don't have it. I contacted the 1996 creative director of Loewe, Narciso Rodriguez, who is really an exceptionally nice person, to see if that he had a copy. Also nothing. He didn't even know that the videotape existed, actually, so definitely nothing from him. I spent months and months trying to look for another copy of this VHS tape. Nothing. The content was lost. True fashion lost media. However, that's when I learned that there were companies that you could send videotapes to in the hopes that they can doctor the videotape in some way and recover lost media. So I looked for one in the UK, and incredibly, I found this website, which I know looks awfully sketchy, but I figured if they can make my VHS tape work, the only VHS tape of its kind in the entire world, then it's totally worth it. I sent the videotape off, wrapped it unrealistically careful, and lo and behold, they actually could recover the media. So I was saved. Here is the footage of the videotape now on the screen. You are literally watching right now totally lost media on your screen, something that has not been seen even by Loewe themselves in decades. Obviously, I was weeping watching this for the first time. It literally feels like a lifetime of research and journalism finally got me onto something really, really special. I just couldn't believe it. Obviously, I don't have time to yap for the full 17-minute long video to get you to watch it here, and I'm not going to put it at the end soundless. I know it would kill my video in the algorithm, but what I am planning on doing is having a link to my Patreon below where the video will be free to watch. You do not have to subscribe to my Patreon to watch this video. I don't like things behind a paywall, so please feel free to watch it after this video, because I'm not quite done with the story yet. I'll leave the video playing, but I'm not done with the story. So I went back to Loewe to see if they wanted it for their archive, because truly, I just don't want it lost. And I thought this would be a cool way to get some easy PR for them, maybe raise my own profile as well, not gonna lie. But unfortunately for me, given the timing of their new creative directors, they're looking for the future instead of the past at the moment. And so it's not on the cards for them either now or next year, which I think is such a shame because next year is actually 180 years of Loewe. I thought that would be really cool. But perfect timing, but no. Anyway, I do understand because this creative director change is quite risky, giving Jonathan's massive impact on fashion. So I do think it is in their own best interest to keep their focus on the future, but it's just bad timing for me. They also miraculously found the same videotape in their own archive after I recovered mine. So at least they do have it in their own archive, but it's unfortunate for me that it's not the only version anymore, although mine is free and available for everyone. Either way, I am more than happy to get to share this with you now. I'm so glad this isn't lost media anymore. You can look through the incredible celebration they had for the 150 years, which, by the way, included a museum. And there was a whole museum set up. You can see it in the video. It was a whole museum of how it was in the past. They have some poetry there, which I assume was one from the Loewe Prize. You can see they've got a recreation of the original workshop in this video. It's absolutely brilliant. They've got some videotapes of different collections that they have had through the years. It's really cool. It's unfortunately doesn't have anybody talking through it, and it's very 90s. But to see all the things that we were talking about in the original video, it's just brilliant. Anyway, the next piece of Loewe lost media that I will be working on is that Spring-Summer 1973 collaboration between Loewe and Chloe, designed by Karl Lagerfeld, that I mentioned in the beginning of the video. So do contact me if you have any information about that whatsoever, because all I have are these two images, and there's got to be somewhere. There's got to be somebody with a picture or a video or something. I guess what I mean to say is Loewe is just such a special brand, one of the oldest luxury houses still on the market. And to me, their history is where I derive the value in the brand. So it is what is built on for each new generation, that incredible provenance of history and leather and craft and eventually LVMH. But I do hope that we can recover just as much as possible, because there is so much lost media with Loewe. And really, I would like to keep and save what Loewe really looked like before LVMH together. So hopefully we can look forward to the next 179 years of Loewe. Thanks so much for watching this video. I know it was a little bit different for my content, but please do like and subscribe for more videos like this one. For videos more like my usual videos, but about beauty brands, do check out my beauty channel Underskin here. And a huge special thank you goes to my patrons over on Patreon, who genuinely, without whom I absolutely could not have been able to make this video. It was very expensive. So super thank you to my patrons for this one. Really. All content used in this video is done so in accordance with the principles of fair use. However, if you have any concerns, please contact me directly at contact@understitch.co.uk.